Hello there, my fandom friends! Today I am welcoming you to a new segment on my channel, of course involving fandoms as always. This is the start of something new and I am going to be calling it my monthly manga reads. If you don't know, I am a huge reader. I have been for many years. I started reading manga, I believe, when I was like 10 or 11 years old. I read the Legend of Zelda manga literally once a year, the entire 21 book series, and have been for a very long time. But as a kid, the only manga I read was the Legend of Zelda because I didn't know what other manga I would like. I didn't know what manga would be appropriate for my age. And so I just stuck with Zelda. But obviously now that I'm older, I've gotten through lots of anime and manga myself. I wanted to push myself to read a lot more manga while I'm still watching a lot of anime content because I love watching, but I love reading almost a little bit more. So today we are going to talk about all of the manga that I read this month, January 2025. Here I have this big stack of books, all these manga that I read. Obviously these thicker ones are kind of like 3 or 4 mangas in one. So this is probably a stack of like 16-ish manga, but I'm going to be talking about them one at a time from where I started and where I finished. Starting off with the very first manga of the year, we have Vinland Saga Book 1 by Makoto Yukimura. If you don't know, there's an anime that's based off of this manga series, which I have currently caught up to seasons 1 and 2 as of last year. It became one of my favorite animes of all time, so I thought I'd give the manga a read. Now, I have been absolutely enjoying this so much so far. Basically, this story follows a young boy who his dad has been killed, and the boy, Thorfinn, in this story, he has made it his goal to then get revenge on that person who killed his father. And so it follows a story about family and bonds and friendship and revenge and hatred, all summed up in a really cool way from kind of the Viking century. Lots of history involved here, which I am not a Viking person or a history person, so I did not think I would like this story as much as I ended up doing, but I love it so much. I am not going to be talking about spoilers, but what I will say is if you have watched the anime, there is a lot more added to the anime that's just not in the manga. However, I also found that the anime tends to be a lot more like gruesome and graphic compared to the manga, but there are certain things in the manga that stay in the manga because they are just very over the top and cannot be added into the anime, if that makes sense. Something I loved about this manga is that throughout the book, we get little notes from the author, just little blurbs or paragraphs about what the author was maybe feeling during writing this book. Something else that we got, which really helped me compared to the anime, is we get maps in this book. There's like full-on diagrams of what houses look like. There is like the full route that our main character Thorfinn takes throughout, of course, this Viking-esque storyline, which of course I'm not as familiar with countries over there and that were associated with that time of history, and so the maps were super helpful. Something else that was really cool is that at the end of the book, there's a lot of definitions of words that the average person wouldn't know. So for example, at the end of the book, we have kind of a translation notes is what the author calls it. So for example, it says Normandy, page 2, gives a little blurb of where it was used in the book and then explains what that word means. There's a couple pages of that, which was really helpful in understanding certain phrases and words when reading this story. Book number 2 this month that I read is Vinland Saga Book 2, of course by the same author. This book, again, shared in the same level of details compared to the anime, as well as book 1, the things I talked about with the author's kind of notes throughout the book, the maps, the translation at the end of the book, which I really appreciated. This book in particular also had a little bonus story at the end, which involved Thorfinn's sister. So lots of cool things packed into this really cool big book of Vinland Saga. The third manga I read this month, can you guess, was book 3 of Vinland Saga. Obviously the same author again. So of course, following along the same kind of everything that I already talked about with the anime and all of the little hidden details in this book. This one ended up actually being my favorite book that I read this month, mainly because there is just so much action and just fun things crammed into the story of this one. This is still taking place during season 1 if you are familiar with Vinland Saga, so all of that kind of juicier stuff toward the end of the story. Book 4 on my reading list for January is To Your Eternity by Yoshitoki Oima. I have actually had this manga for a bit. One of my friends recommended it to me because I am a huge lover of wolves especially, but all animals in general. I have heard that this series is also an anime, which I have not watched the anime, but I was still curious on picking up the manga and giving it a try. A quick synopsis for this book is basically evolution. We start off with an orb or like a rock at the beginning. We see that it has turned into plants and eventually a wolf and then into a human. And we're kind of stuck in this wave of evolution between wolf and human. And it kind of just keeps drifting back and forth. There, of course, is other things that are a part of this story. It's not just about evolution, but I'd say that the evolution part was the part of the story that I felt was most compelling and most interesting. I wanted a lot more of it, to be honest. The first half of this manga really focused on all of that, and then it kind of switched to an entirely different character with a completely different kind of goal. I'm sure if I completed or just continued the series, I would get a lot of my questions answered. But yes, as of now, I've only read book 1 of this series. I will say I am curious to continue book 2 and onward in this series as of now, from where the story has taken place so far. However, it's not currently on my radar, so if I stumble upon these books in the future, maybe I'll pick them up or at a library or something. But this was just kind of a cool kind of on the side book that took me away from a more popular anime and manga that I've been reading more recently. So it was more of a refreshing kind of hour read. Number 5 on my reading list for January this month is Vinland Saga Book 4 by, of course, our same author. Again, following exactly the same themes I already talked about. If you are curious in picking up the manga, know that at the very end of this book, this is where season 1 ends and then season 2 starts. So I believe the last like 2 or 3 chapters are season 2 technically in this book. And again, the manga does not have a lot of what the anime has. And so it's cool to just see the differences. Maybe I'll make a video sharing the differences and similarities between the manga and the anime, but definitely something to pick up if you're curious in seeing all of those differences. Also, again, this author is just so personal with the way that he writes, and I feel like he just jumps off the pages not only in his story but in his little notes throughout the book, like I mentioned before. Something that the author started with this book, and potentially the third one, I'd have to look back, but the author started basically a Q&A for people to send in their questions about Vinland Saga, and then he answers them at the end of the book, which I have never seen a manga author do before. I've never seen that, and maybe it's a common thing that I'm just not aware of, but the author literally has basically his address to his PO box, and he just answers questions from fans. And of course, this series came out like 10 plus years ago, so I am very late to the party, but it's just cool to think that he was doing that like so long ago, I guess, compared to today, where I just don't see authors doing that really as much. At least not for manga that I'm familiar with. Last up on my list of mangas I read this month is book 6 of Vinland Saga, of course, the same author. As you can tell, this month was a huge Vinland Saga month for me. I am just trying to cruise through this series of manga as fast as possible while still enjoying the series because of how much the anime meant to me and because of how much I want to get to the point in the manga that is going to be brand new. I really, really want to continue this story without getting spoiled, and I don't know exactly when we're going to get the 3rd season of the anime. I know there was a pretty big gap between season 1 and 2, and so it could be another year or 2 before we potentially get season 3. So I will be, for probably the next couple months, cruising through this whole series, and I'm hoping to finish by March. That's kind of my goal. Here we have all of the manga that I read through this month. If you have also read these, I would love to hear from you if you have a favorite. Personally, out of all of these, like I said earlier, the 3rd Vinland Saga book was my favorite because of all of the action and just the storyline that was expressed throughout that book in particular. Also, can we just take a second to look at how beautiful these Vinland Saga Saga books are. Like, the whole series next to each other is just beautiful, and I am currently collecting them all. So, just chef's kiss in my opinion. That is going to wrap up my record of manga that I read this month in January. I would love to hear from you. What manga did you read this month, and which one was your favorite? Are there any that you would recommend to me, knowing my taste? Something else I'm going to include in this video are my future goals real quick. So I plan on continuing the Vinland Saga story. I plan on rereading the last 2 arcs of Demon Slayer, which I have just been dreading. So feel free to be updated on that soon. Of course, no spoilers, but that'll be my second time around. So I'm hoping to get to that soon as well. And of course, rereading the Legend of Zelda books because they're my favorite thing in the world, as well as some other stories on my list, such as Soul Eater Love Story with Yamada-kun, and some other ones I'm hoping to find in stores. I have been waiting for the next volume of My Hero Academia to come out, so hopefully that comes out soon as well. But with that being said, that wraps up this video, and I will see you for the next video, and feel free to come back for my February reads if you're interested in seeing more of this new kind of thing on my channel, where I read manga and document my time reading it and talking about it. So that is going to wrap it up. I will see you next time. Bye!